the next section. So going once, going twice, 3 times. Okay, we will transition now to talk about attendance notification.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us on this cold and wintry day. In this section of the presentation, we'll be reviewing the key regulatory requirements relating to attendance and truancy. These requirements apply generally to all students of compulsory school age. In the district, that's for children ages 5 through 17, so up to the age of majority, 18. The first slide presents 2 requirements that our team actively monitors for compliance. Under the District of Columbia Municipal Code, non-public schools or programs are required to notify the sending LEA in writing after students have accrued 5 unexcused absences. What do we mean by unexcused absences? We'll get to that a little bit later in the presentation. Please note that this requirement is in effect regardless of whether the non-public school is regularly sending attendance data to the sending LEA. So this regulation makes the non-public responsible for actively flagging the unexcused absences for a particular child to the sending LEA. The reason this requirement is so important is because without it, all of the follow-up truancy response protocols can not be put into place if the sending LEA is not aware of the student's unexcused absences. Our student file reviews reveal high rates of noncompliance on this requirement. In this school year, what we've seen is 100% noncompliance across all schools, meaning we're not finding any evidence that says that schools are providing the sending LEA with written notification of the students' absences. This is something that we hope this presentation will help to change. So next, a poll question. So this is an interactive part of the presentation. For students in your schools who have accumulated this 5 or 10 days of unexcused absences, we're wondering how effective have attendance intervention plans been? Have they been effective in improving student attendance? So we'll just take the next 30, 60 seconds, and we will let you know what the response rate is. Okay, that was a minute, and it looks as though the responses are pretty evenly split. Most, 36%, responded yes, that the interventions have been effective. 36% responded that they haven't been effective, and 28% responded, I do not know. So there are the responses.
So that's an interesting split. So about approximately half indicated yes, half indicated no. And what's interesting about that is that it looks like there has been some effect that has been able to occur in terms of supporting a student who's had attendance issues with an attendance intervention plan. But again, I think the take-home message is if an LEA is not flagged that a student has accumulated 5 unexcused absences in a grading period or 10 unexcused absences across the year, that the catalyst for any kind of intervention plan won't happen. So the take-home message is we need to make sure that non-public schools are demonstrating that they're adhering to this regulation and providing that attendance notification. Go back to
Okay, in the meantime, we've had a question come in asking if each LEA is responsible for the attendance intervention plan. Yes, the LEA is responsible for the attendance intervention plan in the hopes that obviously you'll be working with the non-public to implement that.
Okay, here.
Okay, got it. There we go.
Please also note that there are financial implications that go along with student chronic truancy. Non-public schools must obtain written authorization from the LEA to hold a placement open and to continue billing for tuition. So that's just something to keep in mind. This slide was designed to provide you with an overview of the truancy response process. There are many, actually dozens and dozens of requirements surrounding truancy response, and it can be a little bit confusing. There are different timelines for different age groups. So again, here you see all of the major, we wanted to highlight the major requirements. So here on this timeline, you have two periods, time frames, the 5-day time mark and the 10-day. And within this, our team, we just wanted to show here the two notifications requirements that fall directly under our non-public regs and that we're actively monitoring for, and then all of the others. And the slides that will follow will highlight each one of these steps. So here, again, is the first requirement. The non-public must notify the LEA in writing. That's what we have already went over. And this requirement has to take place within 2 instructional days after the first 5 days of unexcused absences.
And that's in a marking period, correct?
Correct.
So each marking period.
Right. So if the student accumulates 5 or unexcused absences in the first marking period and 5 in the second marking period, then the non-public school would need to send 2 notifications. Okay. Okay, so in this notification, as discussed, must be written and can take many forms. I'll turn this over to my colleague Allison Losi, who will review a sample notification letter.
Okay, what we have here is very, very, very simple, which is kind of the point. But it's just a notification letter, and so you can either, you fill it out by, you're sending it to the LEA, and then you check the box for whether they've reached their 5th in a marking period. You want to make sure to indicate which marking period it is, whether it's the 1st marking period or the 3rd marking period. And then, or the 2nd box is when the student has reached the 10th unexcused absence during the school year. And so Sharon will talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides. And so it's important that this is sent to the LEA so you can email it to them. It's not enough to simply upload it to SEDS. So, of course, you want to upload it to SEDS in addition because that is the student's permanent record. But it's very simple. You just copy and paste this on your letterhead into an email, modify it however you want, and then you're on your way. And then you won't have any noncompliance on this issue.
Thank you. Back to the list of unexcused absences. So an excused absence would be the illness experienced by the student, so not an illness experienced by another family member, exclusion due to quarantine, a death in the family, any judiciary proceeding that the student is a party of or under subpoena for testifying. Observance of a religious holiday is considered a excused absence, suspension or expulsion, closing of the school facility, employment or voluntary work approved by the school, transportation failure on the part of the state, medical or dental appointments, military visits, emergency, and other circumstances approved by the educational institution. The second requirement that kicks in after the 5-day mark is to refer the student to a school-based student support team. And this has to take place within 2 school days after the 5th unexcused absence. The school-based support team will then review and address the student's attendance and determine the underlying causes for the student's unexcused absences, employ reasonable efforts to communicate and collaborate with the student's parent or guardian, communicate and collaborate with the student's existing IEP team, and provide timely responses to students' truant behavior, make recommendations for academic, diagnostic, and social work services, and use school and community resources to abate the student's truancy, including referral to a community-based organization when available. And here, develop and implement an action plan in consultation with the student and student's parents or guardian. This is sometimes referred to as the attendance intervention plan.
So I just want to point out here, the regulation that's cited here on the bottom is not one of our Chapter 2800 COA regulations, but here this falls under the district's attendance, compulsory education and attendance regulations governing all students in the district. So, you'll see as Ms. Powell goes through the slides, that the regulations might kind of change between Chapter 2800, which are regulations specific to non-public and LEAs under the COA regulations, but we also want to make sure we flagged for you that there's a kind of larger process of attendance regulations that occurs in Chapter 2100. So how that's relevant in this particular slide, the referral to the student support team for students in non-public schools might be akin to an IEP team or the members of an IEP team. So, that's something to kind of keep in mind in terms of the larger system of what's expected in terms of, student support and the requirements under this particular regulation.
Now we have reached the 10-day mark, and the first requirement, again, is to notify the sending LEA. So that's something that we have discussed. Once the LEA has received notification, the non-public shall consult with the sending LEA regarding whether the current placement or location continues to be appropriate. And also at this point, it's required that an IEP team meeting is convened and that the team makes recommendations regarding intervention strategies and, again, the appropriateness of the placement.
So here again, as Ms. Powell discussed earlier, the attendance notification regulations do have financial implications. And as part of what our non-public invoicing unit looks at, non-public schools already know that, and they're already submitting attendance data to our non-public unit with each of their invoices. What's important here is that there's also documentation that's submitted with those invoices that documents that the non-public school not only notified the LEA, but also requested guidance with regard to whether the placement should continue, whether it's appropriate, and any information about what the LEA did as a follow-up step in response to that request for guidance. So again, this does have financial implications for non-public schools.
Okay, and also after the 10th day of unexcused absences, the non-public will be required to notify the MDP, send the student's parents a letter under the signature of the Metropolitan Police Department notifying the parent that he or she may be in violation of the school attendance requirements and subject to prosecution under DC law. At this time as well, the non-public should be notifying OSSI of the unexcused absences, and upon notification, OSSI will provide the parent with a copy of the Truancy Prevention Resource Guide. And that is available. It's a wonderful resource that's available on our website. If you just Google it, Google OSSI Truancy Prevention Resource Guide, you should be able to find it. Also, after 10 days of unexcused absences, the school-based support team shall notify the school administrator with a plan for immediate intervention, including delivery of community-based programs and any other assistance or services to identify and address the student's needs on an emergency basis. So at the 5-day mark, we have the student being referred to the school-based support team, and here at the 10-day mark, the school-based support team is engaging with the school's leadership and initiating some outreach into the community to address the truancy. And now for students aged 5 through 13, the student will be referred to Child and Family Services. For students who are 14 and over, they must be referred to the Court of Social Services. And this is no later than 2 business days after the accrual of the 15 unexcused absences within the school year. And another poll question. So this question relates directly to that one LEA notification requirement. How many truancy notifications has your non-public sent to the sending LEA so far this year? Is it more than 10, between 5 and 10, less than 5, 0, or no student has accrued more than 5 unexcused absences? And again, we'll give you 60 minutes or seconds. results again.
Okay, so we've reached our 1-minute mark.
So here are the results. Most participants responded that less than 5 notifications have been sent. Some non-publics have sent more than 10, 15%, and 26% of the participants reported that they do not have any students who have accrued more than 5 unexcused absences.
So I think, so just looking at that, so more than 10, between 5 and 10, and less than 5, you know, what do we've got there? 60, almost 70% of the respondents indicated that they have been sending truancy notifications. So I guess, again, we need to be able to explore if these notifications are being sent, we're not seeing the evidence of that instead. So, you know, when we're monitoring. So, you know, what we need to be able to try to identify is where there are gaps in terms of what we're seeing and what you all are reporting in terms of your practices at the non-public schools. Okay, so we've got some questions. Okay. Alison, could you read that one?
Sure. So the first question we got is this for all students or students of a certain age? So the attendance requirements are under Chapter 21, they're for students in the compulsory education age. So that would be between 5 and up until the student has reached 18. So those are the larger ones. The one specifically to the notification on the non-public, if you have a student at your school, regardless of what age they are, if they have reached a certain number of unexcused absences, you need to send those notifications to the LEA. And then the next question is, what are the requirements as students continue to accrue absences? Are there specific steps at different thresholds?
So do you want to go back to the first kind of diagram that laid out all the timeline activities? Okay, can you talk a little bit about this, Sharon, in terms of the other activities that occur?
Mm-hmm. So here we have highlighted the major requirements that kick in after the 5 days of unexcused absences and the 10 days of unexcused absences, and how it differs depending on the age of the student. So the only difference related to the student's age is that the group from ages 5 to 13 will be referred to CFSA, whereas students who are 14 and over are referred to the Court of Social Services. And within each one of these, there are different requirements. Mostly involve notification, that the parent needs to be notified, OSCE needs to be notified, MPD needs to be notified, and as we reviewed in the slides, at the 5-day point, the school-based support team, the student needs to be referred to a school-based support team, and that school-based support team will look at the student's, all of the data that has been collected in the student's attendance record and try to determine what the possible underlying causes of the student's absences are. And then at the 10-day mark, if the student's attendance has not improved, then there are requirements to put in place an emergency plan so that the school will reach out into the community and try to reintegrate the student. And again, these requirements can be found within the non-public regulations under Title V, Chapter 28, and within Chapter 28, that refers to the non-specific regulations relating to attendance and truancy, and that's where it outlines all of the steps that a school-based support team can take.
Another big question we've gotten is who at OSSI does a 10-day notification go to? And that is, there is an email address, and we don't have it right now, but we will email it out to everyone afterwards. That's part of the 10-day notification, part of the mandated reporting. So that's a responsibility of the LEA as well as the non-public, because at that 10 days of unexcused absences, that's when you start to question whether there is educational neglect.
Yeah, so there is a form, and we can provide that to you. On the form is the email address. It's something like OSSI Truancy, and that comes into, not to our team, but to another team in OSSI. They work with another team, and they will send out the truancy guide to parents.
So there's a lot of questions about some of the other kind of agencies who are involved in terms of MPD or Child and Family Services Agency, Court Social Services. Really, the goal here for us is to highlight the 5 and 10-day notifications. Ms. Paul, can you talk a little bit about the truancy resource guide? Because I think in answering some of these other questions, that are really beyond the purview of our monitoring team's activities, we can point folks to really get some additional kind of guidance. Ms. Courtney Edugan is the person who has drafted that truancy guide, and I think would be able to be the point of contact for more specific questions when it comes to reaching out to other agencies who have pieces with regard to attendance and truancy, like Court Social Services or MPD.
Is it possible? Can I show it?
Absolutely. So you have it open?
Yes.
Application. Show my application.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So this is what the guide looks like, and it was developed as a resource for parents, and it talks about why attendance matters. It shares the results of some studies which show strong correlations between days of absence and high school completion rates, and then that's correlated to employment, later employment, and whether students without high school diploma, the percentage of students without high school diplomas who are able to obtain employment with a living wage. It's a very comprehensive document. It provides links to other resources.
To other agencies who have roles in addressing attendance, like MPD, Court Social Services, Child and Family Services Agency. All right, so let's just go through to see what questions we can answer. How soon will this PowerPoint be available to conduct a PD with school staff? As I said earlier, so the PowerPoint was emailed out this morning to the registrants as of 8 o'clock this morning. I'm happy to email it out again at the end of the session, so you'll have it immediately. And it'll probably be about a week or so before we get the edited videos up onto the OSSI website.
We have a question here. If a student has been absent at least 8 days on one grading period and 7 on the next grading period, does the truancy measure take effect? So I think this is a really good case study. So this is in the first marking period, they're absent 8 days.
And that's unexcused absence.
Yeah, we're just going to assume that these are all unexcused absences. So when they hit that 5th unexcused absence, there are 2 obligations that the non-public has. The non-public has an obligation to notify the LEA under the Chapter 28. Those are the COA regulations. And then they also have an obligation, the LEA has the obligation to start a student support team, so those regulations. And then, so he has 3 more, okay. Then the next marking period, he has 7. So at the second marking, at the second unexcused absence in that second marking period, it will have hit, the student will have hit the 10 days. So you have to send the notifications out again, the notification to the LEA under the Chapter 28 regulations, but then also the other notifications under the Chapter 21. And so that involves the parent, OSSI, and MPD, and then either CFSA or CSS. And then 3 days. And then again at the second marking, so even though you've done all of that, the regulation does clearly say that within 5 and in a marking period. So when the student has its 5th unexcused absence in that second marking period, you still need to send another notification to the LEA. But that's that really simple form that you can just email.
Yeah, the time frames get very complicated, so if you need to refer back to the slides, sometimes it refers to instructional days, sometimes it's calendar days, sometimes it's business days. So yeah, you can, within each slide, there's a part of that table that says time frame. That might be helpful.
So there's a question, a request to provide the link to the attendance and truancy guide. We will be sure to include that in the follow-up email.
And for the question about the age, the compulsory age in the district is up through 17, so until the age of majority is not 16 in the District of Columbia.
Can we get a list of the contact information for CSS and the Office of Attorney General Juvenile Section? That contact information is in the attendance and truancy guide. So again, we'll be forwarding a copy of the guide itself and a link to it on the OSSI website in our follow-up email. Doug, go ahead.
Somebody asked, is CSS and OIE the same or different for referral? I'm not. So CSS is Court Social Services. That is a federal agency. And I'm guessing the OIE is.
What is that? I'm not familiar with that.
I think it might be the Office of Youth Engagement, which is an initiative under OSSI, I think, or something under the mayor. Anyway, I think that the office, if OIE is what I'm thinking of, it's a district level agency, so totally different than Court Social Services. And then there's a question here about when do families need to provide doctor's notes for excused absences due to illness versus parents reporting a student's illness and the absences accruing at a notable rate. So I think this is a useful question because the answer is going to be a non-answer. That is up to what the non-public attendance policy and the local education agency policies are. And so,
yeah, the non-public should be following the LEA's attendance policy requirements. Same for reporting. Like we know DCPS has non-public submit their attendance twice a week. If a charter school wants you submitting it every 3 days, you should be following what that is for that specific student.
So there's a question, does the age requirement apply for students in our programs who are up to the age of 22? As Ms. Lozzi said before, when it comes to 5 to 10 day notifications under the Chapter 2800 COA regulations, yes, those requirements apply for any student at a non-public school up to the age of 22. Okay, let's see, contact information.
We got a question here. Is the LEA responsible for notification, all notifications after 10 days of unexcused absence? And this question is from a non-public. As was said earlier, the 10-day notifications under Chapter 21, that is, Chapter 21 applies to all educational institutions, it doesn't specify whether the responsibility is the LEA or the non-public. It specifically says educational institutions. So that means that it applies to the non-public, it applies to the LEA. You are mandated reporters.
And for any student that you're serving from the District of Columbia.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so both are on the hook, the LEA and the non-public.
Is it possible to get the requirements, procedures that DCPS uses to monitor students in non-publics as an example? I think we have our colleagues from DCPS on the line here. So if anybody is able to respond to that, we'd appreciate it. If not, we can get an answer to that request and post that in a response for everyone if DCPS is not on the call. Let me actually see if I can take a look. Any other questions in the meantime?
There are a lot of other questions in here that I think we've answered them in the others, but we will go through, and if we haven't answered the questions, we'll send.
We do have something from DCPS. Is it possible to get the requirements / procedures that DCPS uses to monitor students in non-publics as an example? So for the purposes of the call, we're actually not unmuting the phones. If you could just use the question box to respond, that would be appreciated. Let's see. Let me see if I can find the DCPS person. Oh, here we go.
I can unmute her, but I don't know how it's recording.
Okay, Sarah, you're actually we've taken off the mute, so you can respond by voice.
Okay, I guess I wanted to follow up. So you're looking for the requirements we use for what specifically?
It's our understanding that non-public schools are submitting attendance to their progress monitor, probably at least a couple times a week. There's some guidelines that DCPS has set up for the non-publics, and I think the charters are wondering what that guideline is, so maybe they can mirror that or use it to create their own guideline.
Okay, so I guess I don't have kind of like one answer, because I think with our different non-publics, just depending upon the progress managers they're working with and I guess the relationships they've established, they have just different periodic reporting. So I don't have like one set of guidelines that is uniform across the board. I think, yeah, we just kind of have like a periodic check-in. I don't know that that's...
Okay, and then there is an online application, right? You guys use, I think, a QuickBase app for non-public schools to submit attendance?
Yes. Okay. So I apologize. I know that was somewhat vague of an answer.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes. Yep. So what you all should also be aware of, I'm sure some of the non-publics already are aware, OSSI is working on an attendance tracking system called SEATS, and there's a pilot program going on right now that is being developed and will be expanded in the coming months to be able to track attendance So we haven't, my team has not been an active participant in that development process and up to this point, but we will likely be working with the folks developing this SEATS is the acronym, attendance tracking program, and where there's relevance and overlap with existing kind of reporting requirements and notification requirements for attendance. You know, we certainly will put in our requirements to make sure that, one, there's a reduction in the duplication of reporting that goes on, and that, you know, any relevant Chapter 2800 COA regulations will be able to be addressed within the new system. So really, it's just more to come when it comes to looking at this OSCE application for attendance notification and reporting.
There's another question here. If a student already has a CFSA worker, would another referral have to be sent to CFSA after the 10-day absence? So my understanding of the way CFSA is set up is that the foster care system is separate from the CPS division, and so I'm not sure which. I'm going to guess that the CFSA worker assigned to the student is probably through maybe the foster care system, but also my understanding is that they also use a lot of contract agencies, and so that is different than the referral that you would need to make to CFSA.
So just some clarifications. The QuickBase system that DCPS uses is a system where attendance is submitted weekly through the QuickBase application, so it's not submitted to the DCPS progress monitors. Several non-publics have indicated that they've been part of the pilot program for OSCE SEATS attendance program as well, and some of the comments include that the system is good so far. It flags benchmark accruals and it flags absences after 5 days. So, you know, we're excited to see kind of where this development goes in terms of essentially kind of taking over all of the attendance reporting and notification processes that currently exist, unifying them into one system across the non-public schools and all of the LEAs, both DCPS and the charters. So, you know, as this development process continues, we'll have more information on that. All right. Let's see. At this point, I think we're just about out of time to make sure that we're kind of sticking with our timeline. So any questions that we didn't get to, we will follow up and provide responses afterwards. Okay, so